All right, hello and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be looking at the over-under lines for the first time for this upcoming season. I actually made my own predictions. I did this a couple years ago. I made a video similar to this, decided to come back to it. So I made my own lines, just kind of off the dome. Didn't want to look at anybody else's opinions, any other lines people were throwing out there. I just sat down, mapped this out in 20, 30 minutes. I feel like I might have some things I would change my mind on, if I gave it more thought, but I decided just to take a quick stab at it and see how similar the lines on FanDuel Sportsbook are. The reason why I'm looking at FanDuel today is because the Vegas Insider website doesn't have the page live yet for showing all of the different sportsbooks lines. So I decided to choose just one sportsbook to look at their lines instead. And that is FanDuel is the one I landed on. So gonna look at those. Haven't looked at any of these yet. Like I said before, over under for the Atlanta Hawks is 46.5. I have them at 45.5. I did kind of feel like it might be a little higher, but I also, along with this, I had it math out to be, exactly even wins wise. So like the total number of wins, if you add up all of these lines, is 1,230. And that would be equal to their corresponding losses also, So I don't know if sportsbooks use that method when making their lines, or if they just kind of give a line for each one and don't pay attention to, how that line should affect the math of all the other teams' lines, I guess that would be something I could look into after I get all these lines, add them all up, see if they add up to 1,230. So as I was saying, Atlanta, the reason why I didn't put their line up a little higher was because giving them a win to their line would mean I would have to take a win away from somebody else's. And I just couldn't really find a spot to do that where it felt all that good, so I decided just to leave Atlanta's at 45.5 because I kind of feel like that's where I would put their line. I felt like the general public would be maybe a tiny bit higher than me on Atlanta, and come to find out that is the case. They did add some depth in this offseason, and then they have Jalen Johnson coming back, their second best player who missed the latter half of last season. And then also, obviously, the East is wide open with all of the Achilles injuries that they had affect them in the playoffs last year. And then a couple of those teams, like the Celtics and the Pacers, both seem like they're committing to a gap year. When they have their star player tear their ACL, then they decide to make some moves, lose some of their other key pieces, like the Pacers lost Miles Turner, and then the Celtics lost everybody other than Jaylen Brown and Derek White. So, there's a lot more wins to go around for some of these other teams in the middle here in the East this year. And so that is what I think Atlanta is benefiting from for sure. And now looking at this, I feel like I should add a column to show what the actual line is that I can add as I go through. And all right, there we go. We've got another column here now to show the line from FanDuel. So now onto the Boston Celtics, looking at their line. That is the exact line that I have, 42.5. Look at that. Boston, like I said, lost all their players. It looks like they are favored though to go over the line, slightly more than under. And I could see that for sure. They're going to be a hard team to predict. I feel like they're going to be somewhere around 500 because they still have a really good team. Even their bench guys that never played last year, we don't know how good they are, but some of those guys do have some fans around the league and they've been in a good system this whole time. Getting more playing time it might show that they're a little bit higher in value than people previously thought. Now we get to see what Jaylen Brown as a number one option on a team for a whole season looks like. Now onto the Brooklyn Nets. Their over-under line is 20.5 wins. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about this, I don't know why I put it so high. Why did I do 25.5? That doesn't make a lot of sense. I guess they won 26 last year, but they also had a lot more good players at the start of last season with Dorian Finney-Smith and Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson. None of those guys are there anymore, but they do have Michael Porter Jr. And assuming they finally land on a deal with Cam Thomas, who's a restricted free agent at the moment, assuming that happens, with this weak East, I don't know. I feel like 25 wins isn't all that much for this Nets team. And they are even odds to go over or under at 20.5. I feel like that's a low line. Even though this team is going to be bad for sure, that's still a little low, I feel like. But I do think that line is better than mine. I will say that. I think my line was just a little half-baked. Didn't really think about it too hard. Now on to another bad team, the Charlotte Hornets. 27.5 is their line. I was really thinking about going 27.5 on my line, but I ended up going to 28. They were the team that I was actually thinking about taking a win away away to give one to Atlanta. Every single year, the past like 3 now, it feels like this has been their line, about 27 to 30 range, and they never hit it. They're always under. As you can see, they won 19 last year. LaMelo Ball is always injured. He literally sits out half the games every season. So if we see that continue, it's going to be rough, but they are favored to go over on that 27.5 line, it looks like. And that brings us to the Chicago Bulls, whose line is 31.5. Wow, that's really low. I thought mine was going to be a little bit higher. I kind of thought maybe like 35.5, 36.5 would be the line, but 31.5. I mean, they won 39 last year, and they're bringing back all the same guys. I guess they did have LaVine for the entire beginning of the season last year until the trade deadline. I might be wrong on this, but I feel like their record was at least as good, if not maybe a little bit better, after they lost LaVine in the trade deadline. But also those games at that stretch of the season, especially the games that are in March and April, you can't really take all that seriously, as we've seen throughout the course of NBA history, especially in recent years. A lot of teams are tanking down that stretch or just sitting out their players to rest their stars, before the playoffs. It's a lot of players that haven't played all season long that all of a sudden are starting games in March. So, you have to take that slate of the schedule with a grain of salt. But I do think they had about as good of a record with LaVine as they had without him. And that's why I feel like that line is a little low. That is definitely the biggest difference so far. Now moving on to the Cleveland Cavaliers. They have a line of 56.5 wins. They won 64 last season. And that is the exact same number that I gave them, 56.5. Good line. They're definitely the favorite to win the most games in this regular season in the East, maybe in both conferences. Although I do have their line a little bit lower than I have the Thunders, wherever that is, right there. But, they have one of the best 5-man units in all basketball. Really good coach in Kenny Atkinson. Gonna win a lot of games in the regular season. Definitely the favorite to come out of the East as well, I would say, with the Knicks not too far behind, as we'll get to. But yeah, it's a good line for them. And then the Dallas Mavericks, 40.5. Okay, that's higher than I thought. I had them at 35.5, which does feel a little low with having Cooper Flag and obviously Anthony Davis. But the thing is, we don't know how healthy AD is going to be. He's getting another year older, missed a lot of the season last year. And then Kyrie, we know for sure is going to miss a decently large portion of the season with his ACL rehab. And it looks like they are favored to go under this line, though, for what it's worth. 40.5 games. So, right at the 500 mark. So I do feel like that line's a little high, but I also feel like my line might be a little low at the same time. It's just the West is so hard. I struggled a lot with the West. It's basically just the opposite problem as the East. There's too many good teams in the West versus the East. There's not enough good teams. And now that brings us to my favorite team, the Denver Nuggets, as you can see with my Jokic jersey hanging in the background. Honestly, I feel like their line might be higher than where I have them at. I have them at 53.5, just because, again, of how grueling the West is. It's hard to get a lot of games like over the 50 mark. You don't see the line get that high, especially with all of these teams down here having aspirations for 50 wins as well. So, but I am curious to see what the number is. It is 53.5 right on the dot. All right, but they are favored to go over 53.5. But yeah, I just gave Jokic a lot more weapons to utilize this season with the roster around him there, and also finally a backup center, somebody to actually play basketball while Jokic is not playing basketball, and hopefully we can tread water there a little bit. But yeah, 53.5 I think is a good line for them. And then the Detroit Pistons is the next team, 45.5 wins, and that is what I have them at as well, and that's right at what they won last season. 44 is what they had last season. And I felt like they're gonna get a little bit better just because, the East having a lot more wins to go around. And then also I feel like they improved the roster a little bit, at least a wash, because presumably at least losing Malik Beasley, who's caught up in his legal situation right now, and then also Tim Hardaway Jr. But they added Duncan Robinson, Karis LeVert, also 2 Michigan guys coming home, so that's going to be a feel good story there. And also just more shooters to put around Cade, which is the formula that's clearly working. They went from being the worst team in basketball and all of sports really just 2 seasons ago to a competent basketball club that wins games in the Eastern Conference, centered around Cade Cunningham as the offensive engine, distributing everything, playing pick and roll with Jalen Duren primarily as the roller, and then just putting shooters all around that on the court. It's a pretty good recipe for winning some basketball games, so I feel like they're going to do just fine there. 45 I think is a pretty good line, but I also feel really good about the over on that, and so does FanDuel, looks like. I shouldn't say really good because -108 versus -122 is barely. Oh, and I'm actually doing this backwards, I think. Did it say minus or plus? Depending on whether or not this says minus or plus, that changes which one it favors. If it's minus, then under 45 is actually favored because it's a larger negative number. I can't tell what that symbol is. Let me look at it. Oh, it is minus. Okay, so that means that this would be the actual favored one. So all of the ones that I've been saying this whole time, I guess, are wrong, if I'm understanding this correctly. But, just for context, I've never actually placed bets on things with this type of, I think this is the pretty standard though, sports betting lines, the way that they do the books. Usually if your odds are negative, that means you're favored. And the farther away from zero that negative number is, the more likely your odds are. So I guess, Dallas is favored to go over 40. But that seems backwards to every single one. That feels a little wrong, Maybe I have that flipped around, maybe not. But we're just going to keep swimming here. And now on to a team that I feel like I'm going to be a little bit lower on. There were another team that I was trying to add some more wins to just because I feel like their line's going to be higher than where I have them. But I just am unsure because of health with Steph and Jimmy at their advanced ages, along with Draymond and their track record and not being able to stay healthy. And then also they don't have a center on their roster currently, really, other than Quentin Post and Trace Jackson Davis, I guess, are their two actual centers. People are chalking up Al Horford as a done deal signing there after they figure out the Jonathan Kuminga restricted free agent situation. But also, I don't know, I'm not going to really place all that much worth or why is this riding on a player that's not even on the roster at the moment? And also a guy he's 40 years old at this point. So who knows if he stays, fully healthy. And so I guess to look at the Golden State Warriors line, it is 45.5. So it is a little bit higher than I put. And it looks like the way I've corrected to, for sure. Okay. I just tested it out by clicking on it. You see the preview of the bet slip. So if you bet $10 on this minus 112, you get $8.93. And if you bet on this one, the minus 118, you get $8.47. So this one is the favorite one because it's more likely to happen. You get less return. So for sure. They're favored to go under on 45.5 wins. And that's where I would probably lean. We are now on to the Houston Rockets, who I put their line right even with the Denver Nuggets. I feel like their line might be, if it's not the same, if it's not 53.5, I feel like it's going to be 54.5. I think it's going to be higher than the Nuggets. That's going to be my prediction. It's 56.5. That is high. That is a high line. I know they added Kevin Durant, but he also doesn't play a lot of games in the regular season, and he's yet another year older now. They are favored to go under, so there's that. But 56.5, that feels just a little hefty to me. Losing Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green, who are two really durable guys that have, stayed healthy and played a lot of games for them past couple of years. Kevin Durant's not going to play as much, but obviously their team as a whole, their ceiling as a roster when they're fully healthy is definitely going to be higher because they finally have a shot creator that can get his own shot in the clutch and at any moment of the game. One of the best of all time, albeit he is in his twilight years at this point, but still, that's why I put their line a little bit higher than what they won last year with, the rest of the West not getting any worse. And if not, a lot of these teams down here getting better. I thought getting much more than 52 would be a tough task. Now, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if they get 56 or 57 wins. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I just feel like the most likely, range for them, I feel like the best line would be closer to 53 or 54.5, to be quite honest. But anyways, that brings us to the Indiana Pacers, who are another team that we already talked about a little bit. Their line is way higher than I thought it would be. I didn't know where it would be, to be honest, because they're a tough team to gauge without having Tyrese Halliburton this whole season and losing Miles Turner. And so it's going to be just a Siakam-led team. 37.5 feels high for sure. So I like my line better here. It's definitely not like the Brooklyn one where I feel like their line is a little low, but I think it's better than the one that I actually picked. This one is not that case. I feel like the line they have is high, and I also feel like my line is better. Maybe 33.5 would be the best line, me a little bit in the middle, but I'd lean much more to 32.5 than I would 37.5. The Pacers, by the way, won 50 games last season, but we all know why that's going to be impossible to get to this season. I'll definitely put all my money on that the Indiana Pacers are not going to win 50 games this season, unless Rick Carlisle is the best coach of all time, which maybe he is, to be honest, but we'll see with that. Now on to the Los Angeles Clippers, who won 50 games last season. I have them at 46.5, which is another one that feels low to me, but it was just hard to, in the West, it's hard to find wins for people. And their line is 49.5, and they're favored to actually go over that. I do think that's a little high, maybe, just because of Kawhi. Who knows how healthy he's going to be this upcoming season, as well as other players on the roster, like James Harden, him getting another year older. Chris Paul, what does he still have left in the tank? But I do think that they made improvements. I I like their line better than mine on this one for sure. But again, it's just hard to find wins in here. What the Lakers line is going to be at? We're going to have to see that next. It is 48.5, so right where I have it. So I don't know if they do the same thing that I do, because I feel like a lot of their lines have been higher than mine. Yeah, a lot of them have. Well, I guess this one maths out. I had Chicago a lot higher and Brooklyn, so I did give them a lot more wins, I guess. It's probably where those wins come from mathematically. So never mind. It is probably about even. And then on to the next team, which is the Memphis Grizzlies, which their line now is 40.5 wins. They are favored to go under that, though, it looks like. I think that might be the biggest number we've seen so far, at least off the top of my head. But they won 48 games, which is crazy to think about. That seems high. Like, I don't even remember them winning 48 games last year. But, you know, John Morant, maybe he has a more healthy season this year. They lost Desmond Bane, obviously. I don't think they got better as a team, but, you know, they have some of their young guys continuing to develop, like Zach Edey and Jalen Wells. Although, does Zach Edey have an injury thing? I vaguely remember something about that. He might be out for the beginning of the season. I might be totally wrong on that, but that just popped into my head now. I guess I'll give them their line here, though, from FanDuel for the Memphis Grizzlies. So just 2 wins off from where I had them at 38.5. But the next team, though, is the Miami Heat, who won 37 games last year, and their line for next season is 38.5, which is interesting. They put it over, which I guess I did also. I put them at 37.5. And I don't know why, but it feels like they probably won't win more games than they did last year. But again, with the East having more wins to go around, they might gain a couple there. So that makes sense to me. And they are favored to go over that line, though, actually, by a good amount. And that brings us to the Milwaukee Bucks, who won 48 games last year. They lost Dame, obviously, but they got Miles Turner, and they added some other pieces around the edges with Cole Anthony. They brought back Gary Trent Jr. and Taurean Prince, I believe. AJ Green still on their team. You know, probably going to win some games. Brook Lopez, they also lost him, but they got Miles Turner to, you know, plug and replace there. So I feel pretty good about that for them. But I feel like 48 is going to be a tough number to get to in the regular season. I do feel like I might lean that they're a better threat or more of a threat in the playoffs than they are in the regular season, though, to be honest. But I do feel like they're probably going to be in the mid 40s at least. I have their line at 45.5, and I kind of lean over that, to be honest. I had their line typed out on here at one point at 46.5 and took away a win to add to somebody else at some point. So that's where I am with them, and they have them at 42.5. That's just way too low. They have the second best player in the world. I mean, arguably third, I guess. There's no argument that you can make to take him out of the top 4, though. And because that is a very solidified top 4, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion in the NBA right now, with Jokic, Shea, Luka, and Giannis. I would probably put Giannis second. But all those guys, I think, are clearly in a tier of their own above everybody else. And just that alone in this Eastern Conference this season feels like it should be good for at least 45 wins. But maybe not. Now on to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Their line is 49.5, and I believe that's right where I put them. Where's that at? Yeah, I did. 49.5. This is another one that I changed at one point. I had theirs at 50.5 before. And they are favored to go under, actually, their line at 49.5. They didn't really make a lot of changes. They did lose a good player in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and then their starting point guard, Mike Conley, is getting older, and he's really old at this point. So that's probably going to be something that they'll lose, you know, some value there. But they have a lot of young guys that are going to fill in those spots, and I feel like they're going to do just fine with that. Terrence Shannon Jr. and Rob Dillingham, namely. So there we go with those ones. On to the next one after Minnesota is New Orleans. And I guess I should mention the Timberwolves won 49 games exactly last season. The Pelicans, I have them at 35.5, I believe, and they have them at 29.5, which Pelicans were for sure one of the at least top 5 for me teams that were the hardest to give a number for. Like, I could see it all over the place, just ranging because of how volatile Zion's games played are every season. And then, you know, beyond that, DeJounte Murray has had a track record of almost the exact same thing as another one of their better players on their team. And they have Trey Murphy, I guess, after that. I feel like if they have a fully healthy season, they could be a playoff team for sure. But it's just how likely is it that they're going to have a fully healthy season? And that's what makes their number so hard to nail down. It could be 21 wins like they won last year, or it could be, let's just look at this, what they won the year before that. They won 49. They literally won 49 games the year before they won 21. And then now we got the New York Knicks next with 53.5 as their line, which I feel like is a little low. I felt like my line was going to be maybe a little bit low, if anything. It's just crazy to me that the Rockets are 56.5 and the Knicks are 53.5, and they're favored to go under, just judging based off of the conferences that those two respective teams are in. And I guess, yeah, the Rockets are favored to go under. I think I misread, that was back before I realized I was looking at them wrong, maybe at that point. So there's that. Under the Oklahoma City Thunder, whose line is 62.5 wins. I wondered, I've only been doing this for 3 or 4 years now of the over-under lines, and I'm pretty positive the highest line we've ever had looking through them is 58.5, and that was the Celtics last season, I believe. I've never seen a line in the 60s for a preseason over-under line. 62.5 is a lot, and they are favored by the biggest margin that I've noticed so far to go under, though, for 62.5. So yeah, you actually get, yeah, this one's actually positive. Yeah, so this is not a negative number, plus 102. So you actually get more money. You more than double your money when you bet on it. 62.5 though is their line. I don't know if the mic is picking it up, but there's somebody mowing their lawn nearby. It's pretty loud. Then the Orlando Magic are the team that is up next. Looking at what they won last year was 41, which seems a little low. I know they had a lot of injuries. 50.5 though is their line for this season, which I think is higher. Yeah, I have 47.5. I did feel like their line, if anything, would be higher though than 47.5 for sure. But 50.5 does surprise me a tiny bit. Not too bad with all these other ones. There's been a few that have definitely been more surprising for sure. And they're actually favored to go over on that line of 50.5. And then that brings us to the Philadelphia 76ers, whose line is somehow almost exactly where I had them. I think this is the number I actually said in a podcast with Jacob recently when we talked about their line, what we thought it might be. I think I did say 42.5, honestly. And they're another one of those teams. It's going to be a huge range of wins that you could see them realistically winning because of the health thing. They're basically the East Pelicans. And then that brings us to the Phoenix Suns. They have a line of 31.5. I did feel like I was going to be a little bit high on the Suns because of them losing Kevin Durant, but I do feel like they're, brand new head coach, first time NBA head coach, younger guy. Usually those guys do really well in recent years. Think of Mark Daigneault and Joe Mazzulla and so on. I feel like he might be another one in that same type of zone. Jordan Ott, I believe is his name. And then also, just health things, like if Devin Booker has a good healthy season, I feel like they're going to definitely win more than 31. They're going to go over this line for sure. They're another team that has a pretty wide range, I would say, but 31.5 does feel low for the middle mark. And then that brings us to the Portland Trail Blazers. 33.5 is their line, and that is exactly where I have them. Just because the West is getting better, they are getting better as well, and they won 36 last year, so they definitely could go over. They're actually favored to go over of 33.5. Makes sense to me. And then Sacramento is the next team. Sacramento Kings, 34.5 is their line. I thought I was going to be maybe a little bit low on them, to be honest, but they are lower than I. And then San Antonio is the next team, 43.5. Wow. I really didn't think that it would be that high. I don't think that it's crazy because it's Wemby. Like, you don't know how good he can be this season. And another health thing, hypothetical. What if he stays healthy the entire year? And what if they definitely have a really high ceiling. Yeah, my line's not that great. But again, it was hard to find wins around places. I just feel like it's much more likely that they go, like, their ceiling is so high. That's the thing. Their floor is pretty high. Like, if the Spurs don't win 32 games this year, 33 games, that'd be a major surprise. Like, they have a pretty high floor, and that's, if they do win 32-33, Wemby's probably missed most of the season, or at least like a really big portion of it. But I wouldn't be like all that surprised if the Spurs won 50 games this year. I wouldn't be like floored. That'd be a little like, wow, but that really wouldn't shock me all that much, to be honest. And they are favored to go under just a little bit on that 43.5 number. The Toronto Raptors is the next team. 37.5 is their line, which I think I might have had that at one point. No, I think I had it at 35.5 actually, and then I brought it up to 36, I want to say. And they're favored to go over that actually, which makes sense. They have a lot of good players on their team. I don't really think they fit together all that well though. It's the reason why I'm not super high on them, but they do have a lot of players. With Scotty Barnes, Brendan Ingram, Emmanuel Quickly. They're paying all these guys also above market value for sure. Jakob Poeltl and RJ Barrett. I think I didn't mention him yet, but that's their 5-man lineup, which is like a really solid 5-man core, but not necessarily with each other, I would say, if that makes sense. And then the Utah Jazz are the next team. 18.5 is their line. I thought I might be a little bit high. I thought it would probably be like 21, 22, but 18 is a number for sure. And they are favored to go under that. It's positive It's positive odds for them to go over. You make more than double your money if you bet on them to go over on 18.5 wins. They won 17 last year, so maybe. And they did trade a lot of the players that were winning them those games, to be honest, with Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson. Although I don't think they traded Jordan Clarkson. I think he just walked in free agency, I want to say. Or they might have bought him out, to be honest. But regardless, the Washington Wizards are the next team, though, and the final team here today. And that is a line of 21.5, which I was honestly between that and where I had them at 22.5. So that one definitely makes a lot of sense to me, for sure. But to be honest, I guess it's just because of the conference, though, that they're in. Like, I feel like the Wizards, I have the lower floor. Like, I feel like they're probably going to be the worst team in basketball this year, which might be true. But even with that being true, Utah still might lose more games because they're going to be playing a lot better teams most of the games of the season, being in the conference they're in. And not just the conference they're in, but they're also in the best division in basketball by the numbers, it looks like. And just a quick thing about the Southwest division. This is crazy. If you would have shown me this as like, these are going to be the lines, this is going to be the over-under lines for the Southwest division. If you showed me these numbers 2 years ago, like, that would have been such a shocking thing to look at with Houston, because 2 years ago, I think Houston won like 20 games. Yeah, they won 22 games in 2023. Then also being like, why is Dallas's number so low? That doesn't make any sense. There's no way Luka's not there anymore in 2026, but he is not. He is not indeed. But yeah, thank you guys for watching the video. Me and Jacob, sometime before the season starts, we're going to go through and make our picks on each of these lines. We're going to choose over or under, and then we will both have the ability to lock a certain number of those to make those selections worth 3 points instead of just 1. We also can use a couple stayaways on teams where we really aren't sure, and then we won't get any points either way. Won't hurt us or help us. We've done it 3 years, I think, in a row now, I want to say. This is going to be the 4th. Jacob actually won 2 years ago. Actually, this might be the 5th. I think this is the 5th. Yeah, this is going to be the 5th year because I'm 3-1. Jacob won 2 years ago, and I've won the other ones. Hoping to continue to add to my record. But yeah, be sure to tune into those episodes. I think we're going to be just doing 2 of them as opposed to doing 6 like we have the past couple years where we go through each and every division for their own episode. This year, we're going to do the East all in one episode and then the West all in another. So be looking out for that. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I will talk to you guys next video.